have to take from the mountains of West Virginia.
This episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego is brought to you by the Snarly Yow, located at the Needful Things Emporium in Charlestown, West Virginia.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me on this episode of Let's Find Out. Originally recorded in 2017, these bone-smashing themes are now available in one epic compilation called Headlock Hits. These songs were written for some of the best pro wrestlers out there today. Grab a headlock, take a powder, because we're going to learn all this plus more. Please welcome a good friend of the show, a great showman, singer, songwriting, the man with the power of the eternal flame, Jimmy Flame. Brother, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. Man, it's been forever since I've seen you.
It has, man. It has. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Loving life. And as we were talking earlier on the pre-show, I was thinking, what's Jimmy doing? Because I started, what's Jimmy doing? It's been a while.
What's he not doing?
What's he not doing? That's the question. I go to your YouTube page, and doggone it, man, I'm already a fan of this record you pulled out, Headlock Hits. It kind of hits to the heart because there are two songs in there that, for those out there who lived a life like you and I have, Big in Japan and Jobber Man, those songs just stick out, man. It's almost like you wrote I want to say, what do you call it, the quintessential song for pro wrestling and independence?
Hey, that's good. I try my best. You know, I've been writing songs my whole life, pretty much. Real quick, thank you for being a fan. Thanks for checking out my stuff.
Of course.
There's no listeners, it's no fun. You know what I'm saying? So thank you for that. But yeah, those songs were recorded back in 2017, and they had been previously released. You know, theme songs for Brutal Bob Evans. I wrote the Jobber Man was written for Matt Sells. He was doing the It's Never Sunny in Matlanta series on YouTube that he doesn't do anymore. But he had an episode where he needed a song like that, and we ended up co-writing Jobber Man. So Matt Sells provided most of the lyrics. I did some adjustments, and then I did the music. And then the rest is history from there. And then Wildman Congo, I wrote his theme song. Cheeseburger, Ring of Honor's Cheeseburger, did his song. And, you know, all this stuff was previously released back in 2017. And a little while back, I decided to change music distributors, and I needed some material to start with to get them out. And I came across all all these songs, and I was like, I listened to them and I thought, oh, they could use a remaster. And so I remastered them, packaged them up into one single compilation instead of being singles. It's part of a EP, and then re-released it through Distrokid worldwide. And yeah, now they're out there for everybody to check out in one spot. You don't have to go searching for it. It's on one compilation.
No, and I highly recommend your record because not only is it well written, it's very entertaining. I guess it's more entertaining for me, and the fact that I can relate to some of the things in there, especially with Jobberman and how he takes
Yeah.
how he gets
Can't we
paid and
all?
what. Yeah, but there's a little bit of history. Oh, we picked that song for a reason. You talk about Matt Sells and you talk about Jimmy Flame. There's
Yep.
some history of both of you there with Cheap Thrills.
Yeah, Cheap Thrills is another song on the compilation. I wrote that for our tag team, Cheap Thrills. We were named, we were christened Cheap Thrills initially because of Danny Cage up at the Monster Factory. I remember he was just like, "Hey, if you guys do a tag team called Cheap Thrills, I'm booking you." So me and Matt just kind of looked at each other and was like, "Okay, say no more. We got you." And then so we rolled with that, and of course, we needed a theme song, and so I wrote that song, and it's a pretty cool jam, and yeah, and that ended up on the compilation as well.
No, like I said earlier, it's entertaining. I'm underselling it, but for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to know, go to your YouTube page and listen to it. I think they'll be highly impressed. But let's talk about something, because I know you're a man of many hats. You've had many careers. I knew you. I actually met you back in I think 2016 or 17. It might have been towards the end of GXW, the beginning of UCW.
Yeah.
And not only are you entertaining in the ring, but you write very entertaining songs with lyrics. And let's go before wrestling, because you were always been a musician of some sorts at different bands, and you've been a pretty big part in Maryland in that kind of in the rock scene, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, mostly Seattle. I grew up in Maryland. I grew up between Baltimore and this small town outside of Frederick called Brunswick, Maryland. So Brunswick represent the railroaders, right? And like right around, I think I was like 16, 17 or so. I won't go into the whole like childhood stuff, but I ended up out in Seattle, Washington. I lived in Idaho for a spell, and I ended up in Seattle, and I ended up there because there was a music infrastructure there at the time. You could like literally just show up, and if you're ready to rock and roll, like you could play shows like all the time, and it was a great place to be centered out of because all the promoters and all the bookers all along the West Coast and then America at large, they were all connected. And I was just like, my mind would just explode because I was like, holy crap, you can actually do this. You can actually do your own music and take it on the road, so to speak. I mean, I'd always heard about it growing up, but I didn't think it was actually something I was allowed to do, until I was like right in the middle of it all, so to speak. And, kind of cut my teeth out there, did a ton of touring, tons of recorded with, awesome producers, put out records, did a couple deals, and then I ended up back out here, where of course I'm still at it.
Yeah, and somewhere in your rock and roll life, you found your way into pro wrestling. And
Yes.
I mean, you could do the long short of that if you'd like to, but
Sure.
I always like to hear a good origin story. So you did you take a break of the music while you were in wrestling, or were you doing both?
No, I was doing both, pretty much both the whole time. I found wrestling a little bit later. It was like right around when I turned 18. There was over in East Baltimore. There was actually out in Essex, which is a suburb basically of Baltimore. There was a bingo hall called Bingo Bills that did wrestling every weekend, or most weekends. And I was like one of the crazy kids that was there all the time. I just couldn't get enough of it. It was just fun being there. They'd always bring in people like Jake the Snake, and I remember Jim the Anvil Neidhart showing up. And it was kind of a cool mix of like, wrestlers you'd never heard of, and then people you'd see on TV. So to me, that was amazing to be able to go to this bingo hall, and then you'd see Jake the Snake Roberts DDT and somebody. Like that just blew my mind. And I remember one night the ring announcer came out. I was like, "Hey, if you think you're tough and big and bad or whatever, and you think you got what it takes to be a pro wrestler, call this number." So of course I'm writing down the number and I'm calling them up like the next day, and they literally told me like, hey, yeah, go ahead and bring $50 to us on Monday, and we'll run you through a tryout or whatever. And I showed up, and they beat the daylights out of me.
Yeah, I went through the same thing, man.
And I liked it. And I don't know what, because I wasn't a tough guy at all. Like I hated like getting hit, and like I didn't even like playing football because people would tackle you type thing. You know what I mean? But there was just something about like I saw like an opportunity there to learn something that I was always curious about. Like I always wanted to learn like how these people do this stuff. Because I watched wrestling as a kid and all that stuff, and it was right in front of me. And I'm like suddenly in a room full of these people that I would see on TV and all that stuff, wrestling, having so much fun, And I was just like, I was just hooked. I was just like, I have to learn this. I have to find out like what this is all about. And I spent probably the next 6 months just showing up and just getting beat up all the time. They didn't let me in on anything, you know. Fast forward a little bit, I ended up, you know, when I went out to Seattle, I found another place. It was called the Torture Chamber. It was run by Tim Flowers, who was a Canadian wrestler. He was also a Canadian Olympian wrestler, but he'd done like Stampede Wrestling and, you know, all the Canadian stuff, and he was well connected and all that. And I ended up meeting him. Same thing. There was like an announcement at their match, like, hey, if you want to wrestle, call this number. Deja vu. So of course, you know, there's me showing up again, and I went out and did a tryout, and that, you know, I really credit the Torture Chamber and Tim Flowers and Mark Ferguson and all those Canadian guys for really, really teaching me, because they you know, they didn't just beat me up and have me keep coming back and all that stuff. They kind of knew I had some experience and let me in on what was going on pretty early on. And yeah, ended up working for those guys for a couple of years, and then I just kind of went out on my own. Ended up touring up and down the West Coast mostly. Did a lot of Seattle and Portland stuff. Kind of stayed out in the Pacific Northwest with the wrestling stuff, and then I'd be touring around the country doing music. And I go back, do more wrestling, go out, do more music, yada yada yada. When I ended up back out here, I met you guys. Started working for Ultimate Championship Wrestling, and that's where I really, connected. I made a connection with Brutal Bob and Matt Sells and a bunch of those cats. Like while I was still out west, and then when I came out here, we had an opportunity to actually be in the same rooms together and all that stuff. And then I met you guys, started working for Ultimate Championship Wrestling, and I had a blast doing that. And it just kept moving forward. And I think that's the short version.
No, that's pretty good. Actually, everybody that I met that saw the matches, even the guys in the back, were always highly entertained by you and Matt. And when you started doing your own thing, some sort of the solo matches as well. Now, were you always Jimmy Flame, or did you graduate towards that name?
Yeah, so I was initially called Al Newman. You know, Alfred E. Newman, the comic book character?
Yeah.
I remember that was the first nickname I was ever given. And that was prior to any promoters or anyone really knowing that I did music or anything. They found out through somebody that I was, you know, also a musician. And they were like, that's Jimmy Flame. And I remember Tim Flowers coming to me, and after I showed up doing the Alfred E. Newman gimmick for him for a while, like I went out and dyed my hair red. I did everything he asked me to do. You know, I found out later it was actually a rib that went too far, and they were just impressed that I was willing to do whatever, you know, to be in the match. I remember he was like, go dye your hair red and go get a pair of Chuck Taylors and you know, paint some freckles on your face or something. And I was like, hey, no problem. I just figured that's what wrestling was all about. You had to just do what the booker asked you to do. So that's what I did. And then he found out that you know, I'd done music, and I kind of was building a name for myself in that universe. I had records out and all that stuff. And I remember he come to me, he's like, you're not doing Al Newman. He's like, I want you to just be Jimmy Flame in the ring. I like how it looks on a poster, and people already know you. And I was like, okay, cool. So I rolled with that, and that's kind of how it's been with every promoter I ever worked for. Like, oh, Jimmy Flame, cool. Let's rock it out. I actually got the Jimmy Flame name from my father. He was known as James the Flame all throughout Baltimore and Virginia, and you know, throughout the Mid-Atlantic area in like the 60s and 70s as a sideman. Like he played in a lot of rock and roll bands, but he was also a sideman. He put together these gigs and concerts for a lot of the traveling artists of the time, because that's, you know, a lot of singers would travel on their own in their own cars. They didn't do tour buses and all that. They would go out on their own. They go to these regions, and then they'd have a sideman sort of put together the bands for them, and then they'd do the performance. Well, my dad was one of the guys that would help with all that stuff. He was known throughout the area as James the Flame. Eventually, his friends would started calling me Jimmy Flame when I was a really little kid, because they said it was like a younger sounding version. They'd either call me Jimmy Jr., Jimmy Flame, or James the Flame Jr. And so I kind of got stuck with that name. I tried to do my, you know, kind of like branch away from it. I was like, you know, when I went out in the world, I was like, I'm going to, you know, really do this music thing. I tried to just do my own thing. But as soon as somebody found out that I was either his son or I was going by Jimmy Flame, I was just stuck. They were like, no, that's the name we're putting on the marquee. So you know, years ago, I completely resigned to just roll with it. And, you know, that's because that's literally who I am, you know, thanks to other people sort of pushing it, you know. And yeah, that's where the name came from. It was the same thing in the wrestling world. A promoter would find out, they were like, oh, you're Jimmy Flame. And they'd be like, that's what we're putting on the flyer.
Hey, you were born with the gimmick, no? So that kind of works for you.
I know.
It's in your DNA. It's in the blood.
It
You
is,
know,
yeah.
being a performer is in your blood. So let's go, if you don't mind, let's go back some
Yeah.
years and the different bands you were with. And so, what kind of style did you play back then?
Mostly like 77 style, like, what a lot of people would call that 77 style, like punk. Definitely influenced by like the Ramones, the Dead Boys, bands like that, MC5, Iggy Pop. Wayne Kramer, I just found out passed away today, so RIP to him. He was always a really big influence on me, especially with his guitar playing, his messaging, his just free spirited rock and roll. Love that stuff, and yeah, so I was really into that sound because it was rock and roll, but it was more of like an aggressive, like, let's have fun, let's not just go into the building and look pretty and play music. Let's go there and like trash the place. And I love that whole concept and took it possibly a little too serious at times. And that's sorry about that. My phone just went off. And that I just kind of stayed the course. Punk rock. I played other kinds of stuff like grunge, especially out in Seattle. I kind of got wrapped up in some of the grunge stuff and just anything with guitars and drums and bass and vocals. Like, I'm into it.
And from that time, and I know you probably kind of like wrestling in the independents. You go work for different companies. You play in
Yeah,
different bands.
absolutely.
On the bands back then you played with and you started, which one of the ones sticks out the most? That has a more of a deep, beautiful memory in your heart.
Probably this band called Jetpack. It was actually, they were, from the Pacific Northwest. It was just a bunch of guys that just wanted to play music and may not have been like, they were amazing players, right? But they weren't like trained, and everyone was sort of like, they picked up a guitar and started playing it, type thing. They weren't trained guitar players or anything like that. And they just wanted to make some noise. And that was really the first band that I was in that did that and actually would get booked all over the place, And it was like, it was sort of like living proof. Like, you could do your own music, you can create your own stuff, you could do your own show and still get like top billing somewhere. Like, you can go out and do this. You don't have to, play what everybody wants you to play or do what anybody else wants you to do. You just do whatever you want. And there's going to be people out there that are into it. So yeah, Jetpack is definitely one that stands out because they were one of the earlier bands that I played in out there that really like just went balls to the wall and said, all right, let's do this.
And during that time, and again, let me compare it with the indies and wrestling.
Yeah.
There's always joking with wrestling how we got paid back then, whether you came out and got stiffed by the promoter or hot dog and a handshake. It's all fun now. Being older, looking back is like, yeah, it's kind of funny to tell the stories. How does that work in a musician standpoint? How does that work with the pay and depending on the promoters and the clubs, of course? But how does that work?
It's very similar. I didn't really think that much about it back then because I was more or less grateful that I wasn't working at Burger King,
Yes.
or even though I did that, I'd been there, done that type thing. So I'm not like, I'm not, saying anything bad about it. It just wasn't for me. I would much rather be on a stage somewhere, playing rock and roll in front of a bunch of crazy people, but I didn't really think about money that much. When it was there, it was there. When it wasn't, we didn't really say too much about it. And it's even to this day, I don't think too much about it. When it comes to money, I'll let other people sort of handle that stuff because, when I view all this as an art form, it's like my job is to make the art and make the show and make the music and then go do it. And then the business people, if they're around, they can handle all the other stuff. Did I get burned? Yeah, totally got burned. But I also, at times got paid way too much money, So
That's not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, and it's the same thing in wrestling. You show up, and then everybody knows the old jokes about the promoter saying, "Oh, the house is late," yada yada yada. I learned how to kind of deal with that from playing rock and roll because we get the same thing. You got a promoter that comes up like, oh, sorry, man, the house is light. I had to pay the sound guy and the lights and the advertising and what. It's like, yeah, whatever. You don't have anything. We'll see you next time. Same thing in wrestling. You get that, and then other times you got people that are super excited to just give you a pile of money, and you just kind of take it. And you're like, all right, cool, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Take the money and run, man. No.
Yeah, take the money and run. It's like, it's definitely not. I never got into any of this stuff because I expected to make any money, but it's been there, and it hasn't been there in the same, all in the same breath.
And it's interesting you say that because sometimes the payoff was when I tell the stories, because I'm many years removed already from retiring, and people listen to the stories and they ask the questions. It's always kind of fun to answer them and tell them about what I did. And yeah, the experience of friends you make, forever friends or some, business associates, kind of in music and in wrestling, you may leave with a handful of good people. You still talk to them and catch up with them.
Absolutely. And I always thought it was funny that when you bring up something like this, or someone learns, they're like, oh, you were a rock and roll musician, or you did pro wrestling or whatever. What amazes me is usually the first thing out of their mouth is, did it pay you pretty good? I'm like, dude, I got to play all over the world. I got to travel. You know what I mean? Like, money was the last thing on my mind. You know what I mean? To me, it's always an awkward thing because how much of the truth do I want to reveal to them? Do I want to brag and be like, oh yeah, this guy gave me this one time for 10 minutes? Because I remember one of the first sellouts I ever did at a major venue. I played for 10 minutes, smashed my guitar, and left, and took all the money. And that was rock and roll. It's funny because like nobody in the crowd batted an eye. Everyone was just like, that was like an amazing performance. I'm just laughing. I'm like, I literally left because I just did not want to be here. Like, I loved it, but I just hated it at the same time. I was just like, this is too much. This is ridiculous. I mean, I'm thinking of myself as just me, and in our band, we're just like, why did we get all this attention for this show when, we played here 2 weeks ago or whatever, and no one cared. Now all of a sudden it's a sellout, and then all the newspapers and TVs here and yada, yada. And all that. It was just weird. So it was just one of those things. We ended up drinking too much and got through a couple songs. I smashed my guitar through my amp and stumbled off stage and hopped in a taxi and went home.
Hey, you made some memories for a fan out there. Trust me. I'll tell the grandkids about this.
Exactly. Sometimes my bands would get mad. Like this other time, we had this magazine show. Like it was like a big rock and roll magazine in Seattle. I was just talking to a buddy of mine the other day. I can't remember the name of it. And he mentioned it. And I was like, yes, I remember that. But I remember the publisher showed up. And we were just like, we were just getting tanked all day long, waiting for this guy to show up. He shows up, and next thing I know, I'm body slamming people through like coolers full of beer and yelling at the guy. And I'm like, blah, you're late. I'm going to show you what rock and roll is all about because you're late, blah, blah. And we went on stage and just like worst performance ever in terms of like playing the music, but probably one of the best performances ever in terms of smashing everything in the building type thing. And I remember my band was so mad because they're like, that guy is not going to put us in this magazine now. And I'm just like, you just wait, dude. Watch what happens. We end up on like the cover with like the biggest spread in the whole paper with all kinds of epic pictures. And the story he wrote about it was even crazier, because he added the hyperbole to all the destruction that happened and then claimed we sounded great. And I was just like, no, we did not sound great. Everything else is true, but
hey, just like a good match, well put together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well put together. Yeah. It's all about the end story. It's not the here and now. It's like what are they what are they going to say? What kind of stories are the people going to tell? So, and I used to tell people, if you want to hear my music how it's intended to be heard, if you want to hear the song how it was written, then you're going to buy the record. If you want to see a freaking spectacle and forget the whole show and just like have the funnest time of your life, then you're going to come see us play live.
Giving their money's worth, man. That's what you're there for, right?
Absolutely. Always go above and beyond. That was always my policy.
And now we jump years later.
Mm-hmm.
Retired as a wrestler. You're in Maryland now. You just got off band rehearsal just the other night. So now we're doing it all over again. So who are you with now, man?
I am so I still do my solo stuff. I'm still I have a couple new releases just over the past few weeks. I just dropped a song called "Social Media Millionaires." It's kind of one of those songs that I ended up putting it together in like a matter of hours. And the juxtaposition of it is, you got models online, you've got people becoming famous online, you got people making money from their phones. On top of that, you can read the worst news in the world you've ever seen, all in the same stroke, all in the same screen. And I always found the irony. I always saw the irony and just kind of like the tragic comedy involved in all that. I was like, I'm going to encapsulate this in a song. So I wrote "Social Media Millionaires" and just released that about a week ago. And then prior to that, I wrote a really cool, like old school, like skate punk song called "Sidewalk Surfing USA." That's gained a little bit of traction too, which I thought was pretty cool because I just kind of put it out. It was like one of those songs I was waiting to put on a full-length album that I'm working on called Denim Grooves that's going to come out later this year. But when I got done with the song, I was like, no, I want people to hear this now. So sent it to the distributor. They got it out there, and it's out. So Sidewalk Surfing USA and Social Media Millionaires available everywhere right now. And then the band I'm playing in tomorrow, I do play in a band as well. So I do my solo project. I try to get out and do stuff with that. And then I got this band that I'm in called Heroes Unsung. It's a punk band for the most part. I guess the easiest way to describe it. But we all love our old classic punk and our hardcore and, aggressive, fast music and whatnot. And tomorrow we're doing our debut show in Martinsburg with a really fabulous band called the Sheckies, who are celebrating their 25th anniversary this year on this tour. They're from New Jersey. They're playing their first show of the tour tonight. Tomorrow's their second show in Martinsburg, and we're playing support to them out in Martinsburg at what the heck is that place called? Let me check real quick.
Okay, no
you
problem.
think I would have wrote it down, right? Or remembered anything. It's in Martinsburg. You can go to facebook.com/JimmyFlame77 if you want information on it.
That's how you sell it, Daddy. So
that's classic Jimmy Flame right there. I remember half the information, brother.
Yeah, so you've been in a lot of bands, you created a lot of songs, a lot of music, you've had a lot of matches.
Absolutely.
Here in the now, you find yourself being more creative now than you were when you first started?
In some ways, yes. I think my creativity comes from a different space than it did. I think back when I was younger, the creativity came from a space of like strict boredom and just not liking where I was at. It was writing music and then realizing that I could do my own stuff and get out, like got me out of a lot of places. It enabled me to travel. It enabled me to be creative in that respect out of necessity. And then also it just fended off a lot of boredom, and these days the creative process comes more from a place of like it just feels good. Like I always know I'm on to something that I'm really going to be into when I can, feel it in my heart and bones, like down to my very fabric, that I'm doing something that nobody can tell me that something's wrong with it. Because trust me, there's a lot of critiques, just like in wrestling, there's a lot of critics out there in music as well that'll tell you they don't like this or that or that or that. And if you don't have like a thick skin, it can get to you because, when you put your art out there, like you're revealing a piece of yourself that nobody gets to see every day, that nobody has access to unless you essentially give them permission with your expression in your art, and you're opening yourself up, to that. And I learned early on, partially thanks to my dad, kind of coaching me up on all this stuff, but just basically ignore the critics, don't, ignore the good stuff just as much as you ignore the bad stuff, and just do your stuff, do your creations because you have to do them, not because you're trying to please anybody else.
Well said, brother. And I know you mentioned a couple of times earlier, for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about you, Jimmy Flame, the new band, and of course the Headlock Hits, where can they go listen? Where can they order it?
You can always go to jimmyflame.bandcamp.com. That's one place. I have a couple, some music there. And of course, you can do a search for Jimmy Flame on all the streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Deezer, Tidal, iHeartRadio, and then of course Bandcamp as well. You can, get my music anywhere, really. It's available, all over the place. You can also go to facebook.com/JimmyFlame77. That's my, I really keep that, I'm up on that page. Like I'm always, throwing out tidbits about music. I share stories on there about the songwriting process, what makes me tick, etc. Share pictures, all kinds of stuff. And of course, advertise all the shows that I do. So facebook.com/JimmyFlame77. I'm on Threads. You can go to Threads, look up JimmyFlame77. On Instagram at JimmyFlame77. And then I have an art page at flamesaname.com. I have a lot of art up there. It's less music related and more related to drawings and paintings and stuff that I do. Though I am trying to incorporate more of the music there. But needless to say, yeah, it's a good spot to maybe check out some of that stuff as well. But the main thing is facebook.com/JimmyFlame77.
Hell yeah, brother. We're going to put all that information on the show description. Also, when I promote the episode on all my social medias. Jimmy Flame, my brother, it's been too long, but thank you for coming on the show. And you don't live too far from me, man. We got to get together one day and trade some of them old stories.
Let's do that. And then off camera, let's make sure we stay in touch. You know what I'm saying?
100%, brother. Thank you for coming on.
Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter. We're on YouTube and also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends. The Snarly Yow, located at the Needful Things Emporium in downtown Charlestown, West Virginia. T-shirts, artwork, cryptid books. The Snarly Yow has it. Snarly coffee, snarly prints, snarly beard care. The Snarly Yow has it. Cryptid spice rubs, cryptid soaps, cryptid candles. The Snarly Yow has it. The Snarly Yow is located at the Needful Things Emporium, 218 West Washington Street, Charlestown, West Virginia. For all your cryptid needs, remember, the Snarly Yow has it. Make sure to tell him co-host Diego sent ya.
Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.